Welcome to the Experts in Sport podcast, brought to you by the School of Sport, Exercise and Health Sciences at Loughborough University. Welcome to the Experts in Sport podcast. This week's podcast is in the Sport, Business and Society Research theme, and it's part one of our three-part series focusing on sports agents. In this episode, we're joined by Dr Serhat Yilmaz, and we'll be discussing sports agents, the changes to licensing that FIFA have reintroduced, and what it means for agents and athletes. Hi Serhat, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Hi.
So today we're going to focus on the recent changes to the licenses of football agents. But before we do, can you just give us a brief introduction?
I'm an academic here at Loughborough University. I'm a sports law specialist, so I'm a legal scholar in that respect, but also a regulatory expert around agent regulations in sport and particularly in football.
And aside from that, so I know some further background of yours. So you played football?
Yes, correct. So I played football almost throughout all my childhood and youth. And then from there, I grown interest in sports law. I'm also a sports law expert. And then also back in 2008, I became actually a FIFA players agent. I hold the license up until 2015.
Nice. So lots of experience in research in and around football. And just so our listeners also know, here at Loughborough, pre-COVID, we used to have a football tournament, a staff football tournament. And Serhat, do you want to let the listeners know who the only ever champions of that tournament are?
It was actually our team.
Oh yeah, of course it was Serhat. Yeah, it was our team.
My goalkeeping skills and your midfield.
So yeah, there may be others listening, but me and Serhat are going to put it out here now that Serhat saved the goals and I scored the goals. Is that fair to say?
I think that's fair to say.
So instead of wallowing in our glory of SSCHS champions of football or even sport management champions of football, we'll move on and talk about what we're meant to be talking about. So, as you've mentioned there, you've been involved as a player, as an agent, and now as a lecturer within sports law and agency. You're researching in and around that area. So what we're going to talk about today is around the changes in regulations and FIFA bringing back licensing of agency. Because I seem to remember, I think this is back when I was at university, there was a license, and then they removed the license, and now they're just bringing the license back. And I think there's some changes in this. So can you give us a broad context of originally they had a license? What was it there for? And then why did they change it to remove it? And then we'll touch upon why they're bringing it back.
Okay. And I think to start with that, to provide that broader context around this regulatory discourse we have witnessed with respect to the agent regulations in football, we need to go back to the first licensing-based regulatory model, which was introduced back in 1994 by FIFA. And the regulations, the players' agent regulations, as they were called then, actually incorporated a licensing requirement. And what that means, therefore, anyone wanted to access into the agent profession in football and to be an agent required a license. And within those regulations, FIFA also introduced agent examination. So that was the sort of the measure put in place to ensure those obtaining the license understand the rules and regulations of football. And then that system was in place over a number of years when in 2009 FIFA said actually it's not working because there are too many unlicensed agents are able to also operate and operating in the world of football. And that was really the only justification put forward by FIFA to actually remove the licensing-based regulatory system that FIFA put in place in 1994 and then move to the system of registration-based system, which was embedded within the FIFA intermediary regulations, which came into force in April 2015.
So just stepping back for a little bit, why were there people who were not registered or passed the exam, regulated? Why were they able to do this? What was happening there?
perhaps that is the market dynamics, isn't it? First of all, and also it tells us the inefficiency of the regulatory system in that respect, by allowing unlicensed agents to be able to operate. And first of all, and then the key perhaps factor for that is because there was lack of supervision of the licensing system by the governing bodies, predominantly because so that they were those unlicensed agents were able to operate, but also clubs and players, they were dealing with those individuals, which again, without proper regulatory oversight, those unlicensed agents, they were literally get on with the
and just doing what they want
with
to
dealing do. with the players and clubs in the system.
So then they removed the regulatory side to a registry based. Now I'm guessing here they've done that to try and get a hold of who is actually doing this stuff. So register, and we can start to understand who is involved in things, and we can almost start to police this a little bit by knowing who these people are. Because at the moment we don't know anything back in the day. Is that what happened?
Correct. And that's exactly the case. So to perhaps understand this bit more, what we need to think about again, the purpose of the regulation. So the licensing-based regulatory model is about regulating the individual. So that's the idea. Once the individual obtains the license, through that licensing, the individual becomes the subject of the regulations, but also it becomes under the authority of the governing body. Mm-hmm. Therefore, once you've got the unlicensed agent, first of all, they are invisible within the governance or regulatory system of sport. So therefore, as you said, governing bodies, they don't know who these individuals are, but more importantly, they have also no authority over them. So if they want to sanction them, if they want to enforce regulatory compliance over those individuals, unlicensed individuals, they can't, because they have no authority, governing bodies. And hence, therefore, FIFA originally said back in 2009, because of the existing of these unlicensed agents and implying that they have no power over them, they need to move away from the licensing-based system into the registration-based system. And in that, so the registration-based system this time, the way FIFA devised it, that took away the regulatory focus from the individual, but put that focus on the transaction. And what this means, therefore, FIFA said, instead of regulating the individual involving the transaction, let them involve, but let's regulate the transaction itself. Mm-hmm. And the parties involved in the transaction. And that's usually in football transaction, in other terms, football transfer, is the clubs and the player. And obviously the governing bodies, they have authority over these parties because they are the formal participants of the game. And therefore, they said then anyone can actually intermediate, so involve and intermediate the transaction between these parties as long as they are registered. So that was the idea behind the concept of intermediary and registration-based system.
And so they've now moved on from that, or back from that, or forward from that, depending on where you think, to bring back in the licensing. So why do they now feel that they need to bring back the licensing side? Did something go wrong with the registration side, or?
And exactly that. So what happened once FIFA introduced the intermediary regulations, the experts define it, we define it as deregulation of the agent market, because what it meant that by removing licensing requirement and replacing it with registration requirement, and without any assessment of the individual who is registering, individual's knowledge and understanding of the rules and regulations, meant that then we saw significant number of individuals going and registering as an intermediary. So what subsequently happened with respect to the agent industry in football, number of intermediaries has grown exponentially, first of all, but also because those registering, they didn't have the sort of required or appropriate understanding of the agent role, operation of the transfer market in football, as well as the agent market, but also rules and regulations around those markets, then it led to malpractices that we experience in the industry.
So when there's malpractices, so who was picking up on those issues and those malpractices? Was it FIFA saying, no, this transaction can't happen because of X, Y, and Z? And who was suffering from those things? Were clubs suffering? Were players suffering? Was there issues with commission and things like that? Where were the problems lying within those transactions?
Actually, everybody in the sector in football has affected. And if we go back to the initial part of the question about in terms of governing bodies, those affected, under the intermediary system, what FIFA did, actually, FIFA dissolved its regulatory authority and placed it with national associations. So that's, for instance, was another first impact of the new system, where each national association need to implement their intermediary system. And what FIFA said in its regulations, those regulations were the minimum requirements. So setting the minimum threshold for national associations when they are creating and adopting their own regulations. So then what we saw in terms of regulatory framework for intermediaries or agents in football, with the introduction of the intermediary system, every national association adopted different regulations. So what happened therefore is it led to the existence of a regulatory inconsistency.
So making international transfers in particular difficult?
Extremely challenging, because from an agent perspective, because the role, what agent do is now global, what it meant that they need to understand and interact with different regulatory systems in different national territories that they might be operating.
So FIFA now have brought in a regulatory system that is across football. Is that
Correct.
what this, and that's what part of this licensing is about?
Correct. So the first, perhaps one of the key changes now, FIFA is reclaiming that regulatory authority through the new FIFA football agent regulations, which establishes or which reintroduce, re-regulates agents by reintroducing the licensing requirement or the licensing-based regulatory model. So that was with respect to the sort of problem caused by the intermediary system with respect to the regulations or regulatory system around agents in football. Then in practice, with the increasing number of agents, intermediaries operating, it also led to malpractices around, such as, for instance, poaching each other's clients. Because bear that in mind, although the number of agents increased in football, the pool of players remained the same. So suddenly both clubs and players also start interacting more and more with these individuals, suddenly registered overnight as an intermediary and were able to operate in football. So therefore the impact was quite significant with respect to the agent practice and agents, as well as the clubs and the players. And then in terms of one of the other key impact was the conflict of interest situations. Yep. So this is if we try to explain this from the practical perspective, these situations are where an agent is able to represent more than one party of the
So
the
potentially
same
representing
transaction.
the club or the player
The
at the same
player.
time.
Yeah. And in order to understand why we saw increasing number of conflict of interest situations, so dual representations or multiple representations by agents in the same transaction, because of the change in the concept of agent. Historically, the original regulations that introduced back in 1994, the key concept was player's agent. So it implied that the agent works with a player. But when we get to the intermediary system, it was about intermediating the transaction. So by sitting between different parties, the concept automatically implied that an agent or an intermediary in this case can work with at the same time with the same party, with different parties of the transaction. And that's what FIFA also identify as an issue. And hence now, under the new regulatory system, they are restricting conflict of interest situations, and particularly by only allowing one circumstances, so defined as the permitted dual representation, and that is where agents are allowed to work in the same transaction with a player and the engaging club, or in other terms, buying club.
Yeah, which kind of makes sense. We'll get into some detail of that in a moment. So I mean, we've tried to clarify this journey of regulation and licensing, deregulation, and it's unintended consequences. Probably it was done for the right reasons, but actually there's a lot of issues that have come about from it, and now they're trying to bring back the regulations and the licensing to control a lot of those issues. So do you want to talk us through what the new licensing is, what the model for it is, and what changes have actually been put in place to try and help the system?
So therefore now we have FIFA football agent regulations, which is reintroducing the licensing. First of all, so therefore FIFA is going back to global regulatory system.
So that all clubs, all players, everybody's singing from the same song sheet.
Exactly. And also, additionally, FIFA requires national associations transpose these regulations into the national territory by adopting their own regulations. And I've seen already on the FIFA website that they have got a model regulations FIFA wants for national associations to adopt. So there is some guidance there from FIFA to the national associations in order to ensure the regulatory consistency. So that's an important aspect. So losing that existence of inconsistency in regulations caused by the previous or intermediary system. The second one is now FIFA is gonna manage the administration of the licensing system. So what this means, therefore, FIFA established agent platform, and agents need to register, create their account on that platform, and they can do the licensing application through that platform. But once they obtain their license, they will remain on the platform, and all of the monitoring and supervision of their activities will be undertaken through the platform. So the platform is an important tool that FIFA also put in place. So again, claiming that regulatory authority and developing a tool that a better supervision and monitoring of the agent activity can be undertaken.
So we know that
within the system.
We know that clubs and national governing bodies have the same system, and then we know that the agents themselves are registered. Will they have to kind of register who they're working with and register kind of their associations with players and clubs? Is that part of that, or is that not?
No, it's a really good point. So it's another important aspect of the new system, that the FIFA football agent license is global now. So an individual needs to obtain it once, and once they have the license, then they can operate globally in any territory with that license. Now, what we know, in certain territories, we've got also licensing system operated or national system for agents operated by legislations. And FIFA asked those territories, those countries actually, to make application to FIFA in order to get their licensing system that they set up to be recognized.
Yeah.
But it's important to clarify the distinction between the governing body and these system put in place by ordinary law. So these are the ones that I'm referring to, like we see in France, in Italy, for instance, there's a national licensing system for sports agents. So therefore, FIFA asking those nations to come forward and make an application for their national licensing systems to be recognized by FIFA. And once that recognition is there, then those agents already licensed by the national system, they don't need to, so their license will be recognized and they will be automatically given FIFA football agent license too. So there is therefore, we need to appreciate that.
And that's basically, I presume,
in the system.
Because those countries, I presume, would be meeting or very close to meeting FIFA's regulations within their current system, and therefore they're kind of saying, this works. Is that how it would work? Or
no, but more importantly on that, although the regulatory system or the licensing system put in place and underpinning legislation may not resemble the licensing system of FIFA, but because FIFA is a private authority, a private body, and doesn't sit above the law, therefore FIFA actually needs to recognize the system coming from the ordinary law. So that's the.
So it's more the other way around than what I explained. Yeah.
FIFA is trying to really recognize and overcome by
laws that exist.
By law, the systems by law exist and recognizing those systems.
So with all these changes that are happening, what are the key things that are happening with this new regulatory framework? And then we'll move on to what agents need to do to become registered. So what are those key changes that are going to occur?
Yeah, so some of the key changes we are touching. So the system fundamentally is changing. FIFA is reclaiming the authority. It seems they are developing tools. As I said, the agent platform is one of them, but also, for instance, FIFA TMS is another tool incorporated into the system. And then FIFA Clearinghouse, isn't it? This is another for the financial management of the transfer system in football, but it includes the payments to the agents. So therefore, what we are seeing, FIFA put in place number of tools, digital tools, in order to have better monitoring and supervision of the licensing system. And then if we look at the specifics, specific regulatory provisions, what we see, we talk about the sort of restriction around conflict of interest situations where there is only one permitted situation, so that permitted dual representation scenario. That's the only one now, so no more multiple representation where an agent can act for all of the parties.
So they can only now act for the player and the buying club.
Buying club, correct. Yep. So no, they cannot act for selling club and the player, or both clubs. So all those are now prohibited, so hence restricted. And then the other big one is the commission cap.
What is the commission cap? Is there a set number now on what commission agents can get?
Yes, correct. And that's what we define as hard cap. So what we have now under FIFA football agent regulations, the cap on how much agent can charge from a client that they represent.
So is this linked to the transaction, or is this linked to player wages? So let's just say, for example, there's a £1 million transfer that we all see in the paper. Are we talking about the commission on that? And are we talking about other commission on other services that they provide to the player, or is that separate? Is it just the transaction?
Okay, let me handle this question in two parts. First, let's think about how the calculation of the service fee and how CAP operates. So we've got a hard CAP. What that means now, only certain percentage can be charged as a service fee from the client.
And do we know what that is?
That's our
Is
starting
that
point.
5%? Is that what that is?
I'll come to it because it can get complex. Or actually, let's handle that first and then think about sort of how that service fee is calculated. So firstly, we need to look at the size of the transaction. Okay, the financial size of the transaction. And what the regulatory provision states that if the annual salary of the individual is less than 200,000 US dollars,
Yep.
then actually the cap is 5%. And if the annual salary exceeds 200 USD, then the cap is 3%. Okay?
Yeah.
So, and then when we think about the annual salary of the individual, it is the basis for the calculating service fee when a football agent represents the player, the buying club, or the engaging club, as regulations use as a terminology for buying club, or in the case of permitted dual representation. So in those cases, in order to establish the basis of the financial dimension of the transaction, agents need to look at the individual's remuneration, annual remuneration from the transaction, from the contract they are negotiating. In the case of representation of the selling club or releasing club, as regulatory terminology used under the regulations, the basis of the service fee is actually the transfer compensation. And that's the fee payable by the buying club to the selling club. And that's the level, the level of cap there is, permitted level of service fee is 10%. So what we are seeing therefore, this cap system where somehow agents can charge more when they represent the selling club than representing the individual, in this case the player, or the buying club. Perhaps the exception to that is the dual representation, because in dual representation, in the permitted dual representation, because they are able to charge both parties of the transaction, effectively those percentage levels are doubled.
Okay, so it seems like there's quite a few changes in there, quite a few regulatory changes that I'm sure clubs and agents and players are going to have to get their heads around and get used to. If you are wanting to be an agent, or if you're a current agent, how can you move forward? How do you move forward to becoming licensed? What's the process for that?
Another good question. Let's clarify this first. So as of 9th of January 2022, the new regulations are in force, but only partially. FIFA defined this stage now up until 30th of September 2023 as a transitional stage. So what this means for the regulations, only those provisions or those parts of the new regulations are in force in order to enable the relicensing of the agents. So when the regulations will fully come into force is from 1st of October 2023. And at that point, any individual who wants to operate as an agent in football requires a football agent license. What we are seeing now from 9th of January up until 30th of September 2023, during this transitional period, everybody needs to obtain their license. And for that, FIFA has identified or established two paths. One of them is the legacy path, and one of them is the other one is the examination path. The legacy path is for those individuals who were licensed before 2015 under the original licensing-based regulatory system. And there are two criteria to qualify for legacy path. First, having that original license. The individual needs to be holder of that, and they need to have evidence of that. So they need to provide evidence to FIFA when they applied under the legacy path. And then secondly, they need to be registered for some time as an intermediary under the intermediary system too, from its introduction in April 2015 up until now. So therefore, once an individual fits into these two criteria, then they can make an application to FIFA through FIFA agent portal under the legacy path, and FIFA will automatically give their license back.
Okay, so that sounds pretty straightforward. What about the people who don't fit that pathway?
So anybody cannot or doesn't fit into these two conditions, then they need to take the FIFA football agent examination and successfully pass it in order to obtain their license. So FIFA just released the dates for the two exams they are gonna host. One is on the 19th of April 2023, coming soon, and one is on the 20th of September 2023. So those individuals, therefore, who doesn't fit into the legacy path, they need to make their arrangements in order to take the exam and make sure that they successfully pass it, so that as of 1st of October 2023, they've got their FIFA football agent license. What is important to note though, because we are in this transitional period, those that currently registered as an intermediary, that registration allows them to operate still in football. So therefore now we will have the summer transfer window. It's a big window in the world of football, and actually those are able to still operate with their existing licensing. Mm-hmm. So as of 1st of October also, the registration-based intermediary system is removed from operation.
So this transfer window is the last one for the intermediaries, as it was.
Yeah.
And then moving forward, it'll be the new one. So, you know, you and I both work here at Loughborough, and we know that there's lots of students who want to become agents. What is it? And obviously there's others who want to become agents as well, and there might be intermediaries who can't go on the pathway because they weren't regulated previously. They'll need to do the exam. What is there that FIFA has to help them with that exam? And then we'll talk about your sports agents course.
Yeah, so what we are seeing now, so once individual who wants to take the exam or go through the legacy path, first they need to go to the FIFA agent portal and create their account. And once they are on the FIFA agent portal, and once they go to the licensing section, what we see that FIFA actually provided these sporting or the pack for the FIFA football agent examination, and there are that pack. I mean, it's a relatively big pack, about 538 pages.
About 538 pages.
Yeah,
that's quite big.
And it includes all of the regulations of FIFA, which the exam will be based on. So therefore, that's the initial sport FIFA put together. We also have now the regulations around FIFA agent examination rules, or rules around the FIFA football agent examination. I think those individuals who are going to take the exam, they should familiarize themselves with those rules too. And then in practice, it's an online exam, but it will be administered on the day of the examination by the national associations. So therefore, when individuals make an application, part of that licensing application, part of that process is also to nominate which national association they want to take the exam, at which national association they want to take the exam. And there will be an exam fee payable to that national association. So that's the way the exam will be administered.
And I think currently you said it's only in English, French or Spanish. Is that right?
Yes, according to the rules, there will be only 3 versions of the exam questions on those 3 languages. So it's therefore perhaps, those individuals who don't have that, understand.
Yeah, that's interesting for everybody, but particularly I suppose in Europe, Italy and Germany and things like that. So quite an interesting thing that's happening there. So let's move on, because I know you've worked for a number of years and developed your sports agents course. Mm-hmm. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how that might help people if they are wanting to become a sports agent? Yeah,
I think what we have been doing, so since 2018, October 2018, we have been running this kite mark, really. It's one of the first in the world, which is designed, developed by Higher Education Institute, in this case Loughborough, and I'm the academic lead for the program, but also backed by the industry. The Agent Association in England is endorsed the program, and we have been running this program since 2018. And now, in order to grow it, we also signed now a partnership agreement with Johan Cruyff Institute in mainland Europe. Johan Cruyff Institute is a very reputable educational institution, and we relaunched the program now. And the program is about actually becoming an agent. So we educate our delegates coming onto the program around regulatory and legal frameworks, around the agent profession, and then business practices, business skills, as well as some of the contemporary issues, such as working with young talent, minors, integrity issues, in order to prepare them for the agent profession. And then alongside that, knowing that FIFA is and now has introduced the FIFA football agent examination, in order to offer particularly those individuals that wants to move into the agent profession in football and to become football agent, we also just launched the training course on the FIFA football agent examination. So therefore, what we are doing is we have developed this educational pathway for someone who wants to become agent is through our professional certificate program, the Kite Mark program. They will understand the role and all of its aspects, and then take the training course so that they can prepare themselves for the agent examination and hopefully successfully pass that examination. Hence, then they are in the market. And obviously, both programs open to existing agents as well, who wants to learn, who wants to develop their professional skills and core understanding around the role of agents and other aspects.
So how can people find out more about the Sports Agents program?
So we've got our institutional website.
So within Loughborough.
Yeah. And that's where they can find all about what we are doing around sport agents education. And then there are links to each program, both the professional certificate program as well as the training course on FIFA agent examination. And then we've got also the designated pages for the both programs, and that is www.sportsagentsprogram.com.
Perfect. So anybody who wants to find out how to become a sports agent and get some more information about wanting to pass the FIFA exam, they can come to your website, potentially do one of your courses, and that should prepare them to become an agent under this new regulatory framework.
Correct.
Perfect. Well, Serhat, it's been great having you on. We've touched upon kind of the history of football agents in terms of regulations. We've looked at the licensing that used to exist, the reasons why they changed to the intermediary system, and then the reasons why they're bringing things back. And hopefully we've given some people a bit of an insight into what they need to do if they want to be a football agent through both those pathways. And, towards the end there, we just talked about your course. If they are interested and want to find out more, they can jump onto that course. And then we also discussed that we are the current reigning champions of the five-a-side football tournament here, which is probably the most important thing they're going to take from this podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Experts in Sport podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, then please contact me, Martin Foster, at m.foster@loughborough.ac.uk. Thanks for listening. See you next time.